And that is what has can be said to be accountable for the call for state police. And it says that in such instances where the interests of the federal and the state do clash, the police become compromised. The independence of the police is not there. So basically, you want an independent police, and that is the basis for saying that let's look at this. Should the police not be an independent body? If a police is trained to be independent and is not subject to the authorization of the combatants in the struggle for political dominance at any particular time, then you free the police from politics. In this instance, we even saw policemen joining the AFRE. So it's not very good.
How would the police get independent? How would you say they get independent?
Well, the police can be made to be independent to the extent that at least the Inspector General of Police can have a body of also police people who will look into such authorization that conflicts the normal process for which police force is to operate. After all, the president is not a police, but the president represents, epitomizes the symbol of the sovereignty of the people of Nigeria. And that is why the police is supposedly subsumed under its authorization. However, if it becomes obvious that the president or whoever is going to use the police for purposes that are not similarly within the context of the national interest and constitute a threat and will lead to breakdown of law and order, there should be a buffer between the Inspector General of Police and that particular authority in making the determination that, oh, this particular, can we look at it so that it doesn't put police in bad light.
Okay, one would think that the existence of the Police Service Commission,
yeah,
and indeed the Ministry of Police Affairs will help to make all of this transition or independence of the police more obvious.
Well, if you look at the provision, it doesn't interpose the relationship between the Inspector General of Police and the President. It's a direct relationship between the President, his ministers, and the police.
Should it interpose?
There should be a buffer so that at least the Inspector General of Police can be protected. In this instance, the man's hands seem to be tied because there's no promptness in any action. Nothing is being done. We are all looking and waiting for the next thing to happen. And that is not policing.
Why do you say so? Because, I mean, we did see the DIG,
yes,
a DIG visit immediately after that particular crisis, and he says that they're investigating and seeing what's going on and seeing what they can make out of it.
When did this thing take place?
Well, we had it on television. I don't know.
When did this fracas take place? It took place
on Tuesday.
On Tuesday. Today is what?
Another Tuesday.
Another Tuesday. What are they investigating that we have not? What action has been seen to be taken, apart from just saying that you are investigating? I'm not saying that investigation is not going on, but to the public, there will have been some people invited for, questioning. There will have been people detained. We see it when there are interests involved that actions are taken with promptness. In this instance, there is none. Why? Because there seems to be interest on both sides that tends to suggest that both sides have compromised the system.
And that's what we should be seeking to correct.
We should get beyond that.
So,
because if it happens in Rivers, who knows where it will happen the next time?
And if this is the precedence they're going to set, because several days after,
you can see now that a lot of people are relating this to 2015. Now, if we have started this way, and all these things are tied to 2015, because look, I started Governors Forum. Now, the factional leader of a side that is against the interests of the president, his state, and then immediately you are talking about action. Immediately we hear that all the police security around the governor, the detachment, they are withdrawn. Who gave that instruction? And on what basis? On what rational basis can you say that you withdraw all the forces around the supposedly chief executive of a state who is supposed to be protected like any other chief executive? And the investigation is still going on. Nobody has been found to be culpable in anything. The governor is not culpable as of today. So on what rational basis can a directive be given saying that the security around him should be withdrawn. You remember we had that in Anambra, and we saw the consequences when the security around the chief executive of a state is withdrawn. You are saying, oh, this man is game for everybody to attack. That is not the right message to be sending in a political dispensation that is based on rule of law.
Because the big picture is, at the end of the day, all of these actions, the world looks at what we do here, at what we profess. So they tend to see our actions preceding the profession.
You know, we always say that the world looks at us, but are we not looking at ourselves? You know, there's a proverb that says that it is a family member that will call it a malady, but the person looking at you who is not related to you will call it plain madness. This is madness. Simple. There is no malady in this. It is leadership gone mad.
You talked about both sides,
Yeah.
sorry, Chamberlain. You talked about both sides of the, I mean, you said looking at the situation and looking at the pace of investigation so far, you do suspect some compromise here.
Yeah.
What you see, well, how do you see a resolution of this? I mean, if you're already saying a compromise on almost every angle that you look, I mean, if you suspect compromise here, how do you see a resolution? Who do you see as a neutral body that can intervene in this matter and will be of effect?
Well, basically, some of the actions that have been taken at the national level, we have the National Assembly at least exercising their powers both under Section 11 for saying that they are taking over the affairs of that State House of Assembly. Of course, there's a divide between the House of Rep and the Senate. And also, their powers under Section 88 in terms of investigating.
You think that there's actually a divide between them?
Well, in terms of taking over, the provisions talks about the National Assembly. Why the House of Rep is categorical, clear, saying that we take over, the Senate does not feel that way. It feels that there should be an investigation before the takeover. So to that extent, a lot of people see it as a divide.
Do you think that the House of Reps was rushed?
Well, from the facts and the way they saw it and the debate that we saw, basically, they had their reasons. It was well debated on the floor.
But a host of people they've questioned the premise of that debate. I mean, emotion was moved by Honorable Sam Sokwa, talking about certain things that transpired. A host of people asked, what was the source of the facts? Was it after a proper investigation? Because we do know that the House was doing some investigation before this particular crisis. What was the basis of the facts? Do you think that should be questioned?
Well, basically, all of us watch somebody wielding, you know, the mace and smacking somebody's head repeatedly. And obviously, that was in plain view. That was in plain view. Any rational human being should be alarmed. And as parliamentarians who are to epitomize the ethics and conduct of parliamentary, you know, acceptable parliamentary behavior, I believe that the House of Rep could have been sufficiently scandalized to say that, wow, how can things get to this level? Let's do something.
Yeah, but Prof, they cited Section 11.4.
Yes, Section
concerning their
11.4
powers.
concerning their powers to take over the functions if there are circumstances suggesting that there have been a breakdown of, you know, of the House of Assembly of a state.
Yeah, but
and
5.
in making it not to be able to conduct its functions. Yeah.
And then 5, that's subsection 5 of that same section, tells you, well, there are people who are of the impression that they're actually faulty. The foundation of that debate is faulty because thereafter, the House sat in the State Assembly. And so, upon what then does the House of Reps predicate the argument saying the House is not able to sit? Because if you disrupt it in once, it's not sufficient to say that they cannot sit because that same day after that fracas, they sat.
Well, that of course is something that has come into play, you know, to the public domain, that they sat after. But from what everybody saw on television, it was like there's been a total breakdown of law and order. But irrespective of the merit or demerits of the debate in respect to what the House of Rep has done, basically something needs to be done to correct what is going on in the River States. Not just in the House of Assembly, but in the River States generally.
What should be done?
Well, that is a decision that has to be taken by political leaders. I expect the president to look into it and to come out with issues that can bring about a resolution. And don't forget that this resolution is as a result of the conflict between the governor of the River State itself and the president, arising from the divide in the governors forum. So they must, and they are both in PDP. So the leadership of that party and all the people of goodwill in our party must sit down and bring this to a close.
Let's see, would a constitution amendment make a difference, especially in that section 215? There's a portion that talked about the fact that the Commissioner of Police is supposed to take instructions from the governor. Yeah. But those instructions will first of all have to passed on to the president or any minister as the president deems fit.
Yes.
Now, do you think amending that section or removing that section of the Constitution, would it make it easier for the governor of the state or the chief executive of the state to work with the commissioner?
I think there's more to that than just removing the section or amending the section. There is a philosophical, basis for determining how the police is to be run in a federal system. We run a federal system. So we have to have a situation where we look at this particular police situation. Interestingly, the provision for the amendment of the hierarchy of police or creating police state, which the House of Rep presented to the public, it was rejected. The people did not want police states for reasons that history also has, given credence to. In the sense that even when you have police state, it doesn't solve the problem.
State police, you mean?
State police. State police. It doesn't, you just change the problem from one feet to the other. So the question of solving the police hierarchy and command situation will require us to really look exhaustively at other climates where they have this federal police and how they work it. But you see, one thing I'm hinting at, it's not so much the letters of the law, it's the operators. And what do we do about the operators? If we say, okay, we remove that, the operators will still find a way in this climate to conflict and abuse the constitutional provision. That is the core of the problem that we are facing now. It's not so much the letters of the law. There is the spirit of the law that is involved. There is the democratic spirit. There is the spirit of rule of law. There is the spirit of good governance, which the operators of whatever constitutional framework should have. We haven't seen that. And that is what is lacking. But of course, the reworking or the amendment of those provisions to address this particular situation may remove this situation, but who knows how that will play out. There will be other situations that may arise from it. So it is the people who are operating the Constitution that we need to really have, a rethinking, a reorientation, a conceptual value system that shows that, look, we can work together and not see ourselves always destroying. You clash with me, I go all the way out and destroy you. I don't think that politics is what will take us forward.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, thank you for coming on, Professor Oyelowo Oyewo, former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. Thank you for coming on this morning.
It's a pleasure.
It's time for the headline news.